We were told 5G would be a transformative technology.
5G is a quantum leap.
A technological revolution.
Have an impact similar to the introduction of electricity.
But roughly 5 years into the rollout, it seems like kind of a bust.
5G has been the biggest pile of lies of any technology ever. It was lie after lie after lie after lie.
So, what went wrong? Could the benefits of 5G still be on their way? After months of research, I'm starting to wonder, did we all get tricked? 5G is the fifth generation of mobile networks. When it was being rolled out, wireless industry leaders didn't just promise better cell service. They promised a better world.
It's the platform for us to build the future we want.
Life-changing and even life-saving.
There are a few applications that came up over and over again. These were remote surgeries, driverless cars in traffic-free cities, and for some reason, 5G refrigerators. But for each of these examples, you either don't really need 5G for it, or the idea just didn't make a lot of sense in the first place. For example, to pull off a remote surgery, you need a lot more than just a high-speed, low-latency internet connection. You also need a sterile environment on the other side. You need anesthesia. You need patients who consent to being operated on from far away. And if you're inside a hospital, a wired connection would almost definitely be faster and more stable than a mobile one. Unless, of course, you're the doctor from this 2019 ad who, for some reason, is performing a remote surgery from an Italian cliffside.
Grazie, professore. Concludiamo noi.
Another example is the idea that autonomous vehicles could be managed by tons of 5G sensors to make roads safer and less congested. This would, of course, raise complex questions about who's in charge of such a system and who's accountable if something goes wrong. Not to mention, driverless cars relying on a mobile connection at all poses some issues.
An autonomous car has to still work perfectly well even if it's not connected. And it has to be perfectly well. It can't be not bad, but we'll kill a few pedestrians in the process, but never mind, who cares? If it works perfectly well without coverage, why does it need coverage?
Most likely, if driverless cars finally take off as a technology, a mobile connection will be useful but not essential. Marketers succeeded in associating 5G with almost any futuristic technology, whether that's driverless cars, smart cities, or the Internet of Things. Most of these exciting potential uses depend on innovation in other sectors, which phone companies and carriers have no control over and which they probably knew they could never really be held accountable for. It's fascinating reading industry reports from 2017 and 2018 when the sky was the limit with 5G, compared to what's coming out now. A more recent report from PricewaterhouseCoopers mentions using 5G-enabled drones to monitor properties and prevent insurance fraud. We've gone from ultra-convenient smart cities to insurance fraud monitoring. So what was it about 5G that was supposed to enable all these new technologies? One of the most significant changes about 5G was the introduction of new, higher frequencies. Before 5G, mobile networks mostly used frequencies below 5 gigahertz. So if we pull up the electromagnetic spectrum, that's roughly in this range. Now, carriers can utilize much more of the spectrum, including frequencies above 24 gigahertz. They're still using the previous frequencies, but adding new ones into the mix. This means more bandwidth, which is kind of like adding more lanes to a highway. These higher frequencies carry more information, but they don't travel as far. So to use them, you need more antennas closer together. This is called network densification. Building out the 5G network in the US has required hundreds of billions of dollars of investment. But despite the massive spend and technical upgrades, the changes have not been that noticeable to many consumers. To save money, most of the early 5G infrastructure was built by essentially making tweaks to existing 4G sites. This is called non-standalone 5G. It's an efficient way to do things, but ultimately delivers a 4G-like experience. Another thing that was supposed to be really different about 5G was the introduction of millimeter waves.
5G millimeter wave provides massive capacity.
That is giving an enormous throughput.
But despite all the hype, millimeter wave 5G is not widely available. And lots of smartphones don't even support it. Millimeter wave is useful in select locations where crowds really pack in, like stadiums and airports. But in general, the distance they travel is so short and these waves are so easily blocked that widespread use in mobile networks just hasn't made a lot of sense. And as such, the flashiest use cases of 5G are practically nowhere to be found. To be clear, when phones are actually connected to a 5G network, they generally get faster speeds and lower latency. The thing is that for most people, 4G was already good enough. Coverage, not speed, is one of the biggest problems users still face. In the US, coverage is patchy or non-existent in many rural or remote areas. Carriers just haven't built their networks out in a lot of these places, often because there aren't enough paying customers living there to justify the investment.
You only have to drive like 2 miles off of the interstate in a lot of counties and your cell phone doesn't work.
This is part of what's called the digital divide. People in rural areas and people with low income tend to be the most affected. But 5G is typically not the best tool for expanding coverage. Its defining feature is higher, shorter range frequencies. 5G can operate in lower frequency bands, which travel farther, but if the top priority was expanding coverage, building out existing 4G networks would have been more efficient. If you've ever seen a TV ad about 5G, then you might now be a little bit confused, because the maps they show tend to make it look like 5G is already almost everywhere.
Take great pride in bringing 5G to everyone.
People have trouble even making a cell phone call, 4G or 5G, because towers only have a limited circle around them of coverage.
Doug Dawson tests cell phone speeds and coverage as part of his consulting work. He says these maps are hugely inaccurate.
In most counties, they cover like 30 or 40% of the land area, but their maps don't show that.
I asked the 3 major US phone carriers for comment on the accuracy of their maps. Only T-Mobile answered the question directly. A spokesperson told me coverage maps provide a general service expectation. It's not flawless. According to Doug, there's not much accountability here because few people are actually going out and checking. Users might also think they're on 5G when they're actually not. The Washington Post reported that in the US, that 5G icon in the upper right corner of your phone just means the mobile network is nearby, and not necessarily that you're actually connected to it. I asked all the major US carriers about this too. AT&T seemed to confirm it and said the 5G icon appears when the technology is available. T-Mobile said their icon is always accurate, and Verizon didn't get back to us. 5G availability is still limited in much of the US depending on your carrier. Looking at 2024 data, Verizon and AT&T users are only connected to a 5G network about 1/10 of the time. This is despite the fact that the US wireless industry has built nearly 100,000 new cell sites since 2018. The huge infrastructure build-out is also one of the main drivers of health concerns about 5G. People saw new antennas and towers popping up, perhaps close to their home, and thought their radiation exposure could be increasing.
We are concerned about the deployment of 5G.
Go to the settings and turn off 5G.
Your phone is hurting you a lot more than you think.
When it comes to radio frequency radiation, the type that comes from cell phones, we know that acute exposures, a really high dose all at once, can be harmful and cause severe burns. But that is nowhere near the amount of exposure you get from a cell phone. What we get on a day-to-day basis from all the devices that surround us is more like constant, low-level exposure. Figuring out the health impacts of that has been complicated, to say the least. In 2011, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is part of the World Health Organization, designated radiofrequency radiation as a Class 2B carcinogen. What that means is that there's some evidence a substance could be a carcinogen, but a strong link has not been established. That 2B category includes things like vehicle exhaust, but it also includes aloe vera, which I imagine most people don't worry about on a day-to-day basis. The reality is that there isn't much about 5G that poses a unique radiation risk compared to previous generations. There's even a decent chance our radiation exposure could go down due to 5G.
What is known is that for the same amount of data, 5G produces less exposure than 4G.
You might expect radiation levels to go up as we send more and more data. But one study out of Switzerland found that over a 7-year period, even as the amount of mobile data traffic increased 18-fold, the amount of radiation in the environment stayed pretty much the same. So it appears that improved network efficiency might have helped cancel that out. If in the 5G era, people keep sending roughly the same amount of data that they sent on 4G, then radiation exposures would likely go down. But if something like VR takes off and causes people to transmit way more data than they did before, then exposures would likely go up. So if you weren't worried about 4G, you probably don't need to worry about 5G. For the same reason that it's been a bit of an underwhelming technology. It's just not super different.
A lot of people perceive it like something completely new, and it's challenging.
Of course, some people were worried about 4G and 3G before it. Nearly as long as cell phones have been around, scientists have debated the health impacts of the radiation they emit.
Do cell phones cause brain cancer?
The World Health Organization is urging people to reduce their use of mobile phones.
Even this low level of radiation could cause cancers.
There's already been a huge amount of research into this, but I heard over and over again from people on all sides of the issue that this topic is plagued by poor quality science. Published reviews of the science on this subject often say they had to exclude a huge number of studies because they were too low quality, and call for future researchers to do better.
There are a lot of things that needs to be controlled, and if these parameters are not controlled, the results are not reliable.
Olga Zeni analyzed prior studies and found that higher quality experiments were less likely to show electromagnetic fields having an impact on cells. It suggests that if all the research were carried out properly, there'd be far fewer studies with alarming findings. That said, it's also true that there are things we don't yet fully understand about this technology. There's still important research going on, like an EU-funded project looking at how radio frequency radiation might affect the human eye, or whether it could harm insect populations, which can be more sensitive to electromagnetic fields. And some countries, like Russia, China, and Switzerland, have set their radio frequency radiation limits at much lower levels than those in the US and much of Europe. So there is some scientific uncertainty here. But uncertainty is not the same as proven danger. Meanwhile, there is a sizable online community promoting fear about 5G, saying that it's proven to be harmful, and that is simply not true.
These emissions have proven health risks.
Stop frying your baby's brain.
Perhaps not that surprisingly, many of these people also happen to be selling devices that they say can protect you from electromagnetic fields.
Make sure you're protecting yourself. Get a rad cap in one of our cases.
These products that supposedly protect against radiation include everything from stickers you put on your phone to necklaces to whatever this is.
It blocks 100% of EMFs from your home up to a mile away.
Most of these just don't work. If any of these devices blocked 100% of radio frequency radiation, your phone would stop working. They also speak to a clear conflict of interest, where someone is selling you both the poison and the antidote. In some ways, 5G was sort of the perfect storm for creating fear. The industry hype around 5G emphasized how powerful it was, how it was unlike anything that came before it. If you're someone who has any concern about mobile technology and radiation, then it's easy to think that more powerful must equal more dangerous. Of course, it's not really a surprise that carriers amped up the hype. They invested an enormous amount of money into it. In the US, the FCC auctioned off the new frequencies that were being added for 5G. The three major phone carriers spent over $100 billion, and that's just for the licenses to use these particular frequencies. It doesn't include the cost of upgrading 4G sites to 5G or of building tons of new cell sites, which has required billions more dollars in investment. As the 5G rollout has progressed, many carriers have struggled to get a return on that massive investment.
Bills have actually gone down because of competition. That was a giant disappointment for the cellular carriers. They thought they could monetize this thing, and they've never really monetized it.
Some carriers have charged extra fees for 5G phone plans, but overall they've still lost money so far, with 5G investment far outpacing returns. Of course, now that carriers have gone the 5G route and spent all this money, it looks like the industry is declaring victory. It often brags about rolling out 5G at record speeds and about the huge number of subscribers to 5G plans, ignoring the fact that many people were just automatically put on one when they got a new phone. Meanwhile, phone carriers are in a bit of a squeeze. The average revenue per user, that's the amount phone companies make off of us each month, has actually been trending downwards in the US for decades. So to recap, many consumers are not really noticing the changes. Carriers spent a ton of money implementing this and haven't made very much back. So why'd we do this? Every time there's a new generation of mobile tech, a lot of equipment needs to be upgraded, which means a big payday for equipment suppliers. They're the ones who sell the antennas, infrastructure, and software needed to build out a mobile network.
The industry wants to churn the market. That's the only way you can get new revenue.
There's only a handful of these in the world, but some of the most famous ones are Ericsson and Nokia. Because telecommunications is of massive economic and social importance, equipment vendors and industry trade groups can lobby government officials, telling them that the next generation will be essential and transformative, and that if they don't act quickly, they might miss out on the benefits. As I started reading about the 5G rollout, I found people talking about a 5G race everywhere I looked.
This is a global race to 5G.
The latest move in the race to 5G.
The United States must win the global race to 5G.
Similar to the space race, it was drumming up this idea that whoever did it first would be the best and would get some sort of massive benefit from getting first place. In turn, politicians who most likely are not telecoms engineering experts and who might be eager to bring new infrastructure projects see this as a no-risk position. Who wouldn't want to align themselves with the next frontier of technological innovation? The problem is that sprinting towards a goal can lead to questionable choices along the way.
And no countries that got to 5G first have got any obvious advantages from having done so. In fact, actually the opposite, race away from it, or at least let somebody else be the person that discovers that it's got issues.
I personally think you can credit this rush for a lot of the problems we've discussed here, including the failure of 5G to differentiate itself from 4G in the eyes of consumers. Developing a plan for a new generation usually takes about 10 years, but 5G was rushed out in just 8.
Those 2 extra years, it's like a hockey stick. At the end, the last 2 years really make a big difference.
Gerhard Fettweiss's research had a big influence on 5G's development. I asked him why 2 years were shaved off of the process.
It was the Olympics in Japan.
That's it? It's that simple?
They were pushing for it. Instead of going for 2022, we went for 2020 because that was supposed to be the Olympics.
Of course, it's probably a bit more complicated than that, but Japan did plan a splashy 5G debut for the 2020 Olympics, which likely added to the pressure. Fettweiss says the rush was a disadvantage, but still thinks 5G was a step in the right direction because of lower latency and a capability called network slicing, which isn't widely used yet, but could be useful in some industries. Some experts told me that we just haven't 5G'd hard enough yet, and that if we keep rolling out infrastructure and commit to the standalone 5G that really defines the technology, that we might actually see some of the transformational changes that were initially predicted. It's also possible that 5G will be a continuation of a pattern established by previous networks. The odd generations, 1G and 3G, were a bit disappointing, but the even generations that followed worked out the kinks and had greater benefits. Maybe 5G is a little bit of a bust, but 6G is where we'll see the real transformation. Others think 5G was just the wrong approach entirely.
5G is a set of terrible choices.
Can you just elaborate a little on what those terrible choices were?
Frequencies, the way in which they do signal processing, the enormous optimism about the quality of signals that they would get at those frequencies.
And as 6G gets closer, most experts I spoke to agreed it's on the same troubled path.
What I see at the moment in 6G is a joke, quite frankly. It's repeating the major errors.
I think there's a possibility that you could have a good 6G standard, but it wouldn't be one that fixes 5G. It would be one that heads off in a completely different direction.
William Webb says the best direction would involve tightly integrating mobile signals with Wi-Fi and satellite to make one seamless network with excellent coverage. But so far, it doesn't look like the industry is going that route. And soon enough, we'll be off to the races again.